For more updates, click on subscribe and click on bell button for latest notifications.
Hi friends, welcome to Tech ARKIT YouTube channel. My name is Ravi. In this video session, we are going to see that the second video in Linux tutorial for complete beginners. So here we are going to see that first video we saw that introduction about the what are the topics we are going to cover, all of this stuff. So in this video we are going to see that introduction to Linux. So let's understand what exactly is the Linux and how it works. So if you take a hardware components of your server hardware, or if your laptop, or if your desktop or PC, whatever it is, so the workstation or whatever it is, so which has the different components. So these components, example, SMPS, the power supply unit, and motherboard, hard disk drive to store your data, and RAM for like memory unit, so and CPU or processor. So and we also have the cabinet in that. So all of these components set into the cabinet, and we have hardware ready. But whatever the hardware you have, but the hardware does not understand whatever the language you say to that hardware. Example, same, if you want to play some song, so you need to have some mediator in between you and the hardware. Okay, so what is that mediator? The mediator is called as an operating system. So between you and the hardware there is a conversation. Example, if you click somewhere else, on the example, if you go to the youtube.com site, if you open the browser, then it should run background process to load that website. So that website, if you want to load it, so you need to have the operating system. Then only the hardware components will listen to us whatever you want to do on that using that hardware. So that is the mediator between you and the hardware components, which is called as an operating system. In this case we have a different operating systems like Windows, Linux, Mac, Unix. Okay, but currently we are going to load this operating system as Linux on the hardware components. So then what I'm going to do, so I'm going to take one of these hardware like the PC or the server, then I'm going to load the operating system in it. Okay, so what that operating system is, so why you need to use the Linux, so why specifically Linux is only the operating system which free for the use. So how it's called as a free, so free software foundation organization, so which is built by the free software organization. They start a project by name called GNU, granularly not Unix. So the main aim of this project is to develop such a operating system that can run on any platform, so which can run on, example, a platform like PCs, workstation, servers, any platform. So in 1991 a student, so he was a student before Linux Torvalds, developed a kernel named called Linux kernel plus GNU application called Linux operating system. So what happens, he developed in a free kernel resource and he published it to the open source. Then using that kernel, most of the people, they developed their own methodologies. So like somebody developed a cat command, somebody developed a different command, so all these commands are developed based out of the kernel, and somebody developed the GUI, somebody developed, so many things are developed by the different authors, and they published those into the open source project. So there they combined together with the kernel and they made as an Linux operating system. So that's why this is called as an Linux is an open source technology. different companies that provides Linux in market are like so this kernel and the combination of the packages they compile and they make a different features together and they make it as a package or they make it as an operating system. They call it as an a they they build their own branding, so which is called as a Red Hat, SUSE, Scientific Linux, CentOS, or NoPix, etc. So there are so many things like they can use it. So Fedora is also one of the project for they use for basic testing development environment. Later point of time they test it in CentOS and then release to the different brands like Red Hat, SUSE, Scientific Linux. So there are so many brands, there are so many flavors of the Linux. So you can go to the distro.org and then you can distro watch website. Then you can also watch how many distros are coming in or developed all of this stuff. So if you going to the features and advantages of the Linux, what is exactly the features you have here? So Linux is the fastest operating system in the world because it runs 2 to 3 times faster than other operating systems, because it does not need to be have a GUI sometimes. So if you want to install is CLI only, so there are not much packages, so there is no not dependencies much, then it runs faster. If you install multiple packages, which becomes the slower because it uses a lot of memory and CPU cycles. So Linux is the much secured OS as of now, which does not contains much security holes. Like example, it does not have a multiple virus kind of stuff as of now. But that's why it's called as a secured OS, and it also has its own style of security to control things like firewall. We have AC Linux, we have inbuilt features for the file permissions and user access control also is very different from the other operating systems. So that's why it's called as a secure OS. So Linux, everything is file. So in Linux, if you create a directory, so which is also considered as a file, but the file type is D. So that's why it's everything is flat file. So that's why it does not have any inheritance to different files, so that if you get any virus to the single file, so it does not simply spread to the different files. So that's the simple example for security point of view. So Linux is very reliable OS because kernel of Linux is very stable. So most of the times Linux uses the X Windows system, which is advanced network windowing system. So using this system, we can display output of any workstation monitor attached in the network. So that's the most advantage feature, that is the most easy feature to attach the X Windows systems like displays to the network. And most of the advantages is that crash proof, so it is not simply crash if you install any packages, that's kind of, and economical. So it's very economical and multi-user, multitasking and multi-processing capacity which has by the Linux, and it's scalable. So if you want to scale your operating system to the next level, so it is easily scalable and it's very reliable. So that's the most of the advantages of the Linux and features. So what exactly is the Linux architecture if you look like? So if you have, that's what I say just before. So you have a hardware, whether your workstation or your server, your PC or laptop, whatever it is, you have a hardware here. So top of this, it sits, there is a kernel. Top of that it sits the shell, and top of that there is a user interface called CLI or GUI. So the Linux system architecture is consists of following layers: hardware, kernel, shell, user interface. So hardware layer consists of all peripherals devices like RAM, hard disk, CPU, etc. kernel. So this kernel is in a core component of the operating system, which is the heart of the operating system, interacts directly with hardware, provides the low level services to upper layer components, so which exactly converts your signals into the hardware signals, and it will convert again back to the your understandable format to the shell, and shell represents your output on the user interface. So shell is an interface to kernel, hiding complexity of kernel's functions from user. So the kernel built in a complex method, so how it sends the signals to the hardware and how it get the output from the hardware. So that complexity the user need not to face anymore. So then the shell converts this into the functions from the users. It takes the commands from user and executes kernel function. So that's what the shell will do. The shell will help the execution part of it, so it easily understandable to the users. So utilities and programs in the user interface, we have a lot of utilities and programs. Example like terminal, we have a browser kind of, we have a different applications like video playing applications, audio playing applications, all of this is called as a utilities and programs. The utilities and programs give the user most of the functionalities of an operating system, so that's called as a functionalities of the to the operating system, like playing the music, seeing the video, seeing the movie, or audio playing. All of this is in a features and utilities of the utilities programs, so which has sits on the user interface. Example, if you type some command like top command, if you type it, so then the top command is executing, then the user shell will call the kernel and functionality, then the kernel will send the hardware, then only you will get to see that what is the hardware utilization of that particular server using the top command. So that's one of the example here. So that's how the Linux architecture will flow the data or the commands from user interface to shell to kernel, and kernel to hardware, and reverse back from hardware to kernel to shell, and shell to user interface. So that's about the Linux introduction to the Linux. Guys, thanks for watching. Stay tuned if you have any question related